So a few weeks ago, I'm at this real estate investing event, and this guy sitting next to me literally has 10 plus investment properties, and asking me, how does he finance all of this? Expecting him to tell me he's got this big business. Instead, he tells me he's an engineer, on a decent salary, but nothing special. And he just looks at me and says, you're probably going to get your first pre-approval through a bank, aren't you? And I realized then I was making my first investing mistake, because you need to be going through an investment savvy mortgage broker, someone that's going to plan out the strategy to get you where you want to go. That conversation changed everything, because I'm going through the process of purchasing my first investment property. I didn't want to hit a ceiling of maybe 2 properties and then I'm done, I'm tapped out. So the last few weeks, I've been calling 10 plus different investment savvy mortgage brokers to just understand what I'm missing and really understand how not to get stuck in your investing journey. And what I found out is that most investors end up getting stuck at 2, maybe 3 investment properties. And in this video today, I'm going to break down why that happens and how I'm avoiding it from day one to go and build out my investment property portfolio. Let's get into it. Now, the stage I'm at in my investing journey is building my A team, and the mortgage broker and having an investment savvy mortgage broker is one of the most important parts of your team and pieces in the puzzle, because they're the ones going to help you get the financing, get the loans that you actually need to actually buy the purchase the investment properties. Now, the reason you need an investment savvy broker is because 90% of investors get stuck at 2 properties. And we look at the data of the amount of properties different investors actually hold. So 71% of people that are investors, property investors, only hold 1 investment property. And a further 18, almost 19% of investors only hold 2 properties. So to combined, 90.3% of property investors only hold 2 properties. So most people get stuck at that 2, and the last 10% hold 3, 4, or 5 plus properties. So only 10% of people actually get to over 3 investment properties. And the reason most people get stuck is not because of a deposit. So if we look at the average house price in Australia, they have an estimated $500,020 in equity. And if you use $500,000 in equity as a 20% deposit, you could build up a $2.5 million property portfolio just based off the equity in most people's homes. So it's not because people don't have the deposit that they get stuck at the 2 properties, but it's really because of their borrowing capacity. Because the average Australian earns approximately about 100,000 in 2025, and 100,000 would allow you to borrow about 888,000 from CommBank. And this is why most people get stuck at 2 properties, unless they've got a really high income where they can borrow heaps and borrow that $2.5 million to build out their portfolio. Most people are going to get stuck at 2 properties because, if you're buying one property with a $400,000 loan and it's a $500,000 investment property, you're going to get maxed out quickly, because 2 of those $400,000 loans you end up with $800,000. So you're left with about $88,000 left in borrowing capacity after those 2 properties, which won't allow you to buy a third one. This is why most people get stuck. And so the way you can actually increase this borrowing capacity is either increase your income. So you could increase your income from the current 2 properties that you might have, where you increase the rents. You could increase your income from your jobs or a business, or you could reduce your expenses. So that's where you go and refinance the current properties, where you get lower interest rates, lower your repayments, reduce your living expenses as well. So if you're increasing your income and reducing your expenses, there's a bit more of a buffer in place that allows you to actually increase your borrowing capacity. And the third way is actually a different strategy. So having the right mortgage broker that can actually guide you through the process of how you're actually going to get past these 2 properties, whether that's using trust or different structures to get past just owning 2 properties. And that's why you need an investment savvy mortgage broker. And that's why I'm trying to find one, so I don't get stuck like most people, where you buy your first one, you got a little bit more borrowing capacity left over. You buy the second one and then you're completely maxed out and you're stuck. Because it happens to 90% of property investors, and you don't want to get stuck there ultimately, unless it's your goal just to buy 2 properties. But most people can't retire just on 2 investment properties. You need a few more. So we now know the key to getting past 2 properties is your borrowing capacity. You need to be able to borrow more. So you can do that by increasing your income, or you can do it by reducing your expenses, or by using different structures, right? So I'm going to take you through how the average investor or the average person actually goes about buying property. And this is how I went about, trying to find my first mortgage broker. And it's really why most people get stuck at two. And it's why I didn't want to go through this process to get one investment property, maybe two, and get stuck in like most people. So what I did is I knew I needed to get a pre-approval. So I went to and I booked appointments with literally all the four major banks, back-to-back appointments at my local shopping center. And I had meetings with all their mortgage brokers, and they all told me the same thing. What was my borrowing capacity? And so if I had kept going through that process where I would have got pre-approval with those guys or one of them, they would have told me my borrowing capacity. I would have gone and bought my first investment property using, maybe $500,000 loan, buying a $600,000 property using that 20% deposit. And then I would go back to them and say, how much more can I borrow to go buy another property? And then they would say, oh, you've hit your serviceability limit, because ultimately you've maxed out your borrowing capacity. You can't buy, a third property. You borrowed 500,000 for the first one. You've got a little bit left over, and you completely max out. You get up to that 800,000 in, how much you borrowed to buy these two properties, and you're stuck. You can't, unless you really significantly increase your income, you're not going to be able to buy that third, fourth, fifth property and help you build up that portfolio. So this is the process I was going through. And it wasn't until I had went to that property event, I would have gone through this process and I would have got stuck at one or two properties, because I'd gone through the process that you're supposed to go through. You go to the banks, you get a loan, you get that pre-approval, and you buy that property. And you do the same thing again and again, but ultimately you're going to get stuck at two. And that's what I would have got stuck at. It wasn't for that guy telling me what to do. And so now I'm going to go through the process that the top 1% investors do to find a broker. The people that actually end up with the 6 properties or 5+ properties. Only, less than 1% of people actually own 5+ properties. So we want to go through the exact step-by-step process those types of people go through to find their mortgage brokers, to hopefully end up like them if we follow the same process. So the first step that I went through to kind of find my investment savvy mortgage broker is getting a clear goal in mind, exactly what I want to achieve, when I'm going to achieve it, and how I'm going to achieve it. So for me, what I'm doing is trying to build a 250K passive income, and I'm documenting my journey here on YouTube. And my plan is basically to get a $4.2 million commercial property at a 6% yield, which would equal 250K passive income. And in order to do that, I basically need a $1.2 million deposit, which is a lot of money. And I don't have that money straight away, but I can build it over time through building a residential portfolio. And what I'm going to do is hopefully either buy 4 properties, allow them to grow in equity, and have a $300,000 profit if I sell them off. Times that by 4, I'll end up with about, the $1.2 million deposit. If I end up buying 6 properties, I just need to have a $200,000 profit on each and sell them off and use that as the $1.2 million deposit. So that's my plan. And ultimately, I need an investment savvy mortgage broker that's going to allow me to get from where I am now to hopefully building up this residential portfolio, 4 to 6 properties, selling them off, and then buying that commercial property that's going to give me the passive income that I want. So that's my clear goal. I know what I want to achieve. Now I need to know and have clarity on my numbers, know exactly where I am now. So that came from understanding my income, what was my monthly average and the 12-month total, understanding my expenses. So literally printing out all the bank statements, going through each item, getting my monthly average and my 12-month total, and then clarifying my assets. How much cash do I have? What is my super? Do I own any investment properties? How much are they worth? My shares and other, things like cars and cryptos, and calculating all them together. How much assets do I actually own? And what are my liabilities like HEX, credit cards, car loans and mortgages, calculating all that to get a clear actual financial, snapshot of where I am, in terms of income, expenses, assets, and liabilities. So I know where I am and I've got a clear picture of where I want to go. And then you need to actually go out and find the investment savvy mortgage broker. That's the next step. So where do we find them? We can find them through Google. We just Google investment property mortgage broker and type in your location, whether it's Sydney, Brisbane, a city or a suburb. So that's one way where you can find mortgage brokers. Then you can also go through referrals. This is where you literally just ask people that you know that own properties or investment properties, who is their mortgage broker. I found a few just by asking people I know. And then you can also go to property investing events. This is where I went to that event. I met this guy sitting next to me and he introduced me to his mortgage broker that he used. And you can also go through podcasts or different social medias, whether it's Instagram, YouTube as well. Find a mortgage broker that resonates with you. Just because they're on a podcast or on social media, they're doing it to promote their business. They're not there just because they're a great mortgage broker. So you got to actually filter out which ones are the good marketers versus which one's actually the good mortgage brokers. So find one that resonates with you and has a clear kind of allows you to understand what you need to do going forward. So there's 3 ways you can actually find investment savvy mortgage brokers. What I did is I basically had a 5 to 10 person shortlist and I booked calls with all of them. And once you book calls, you need to know what to ask them because, especially me going through my process of finding my first investment property, it's a daunting process. You don't know necessarily what to ask until you've gone through it all. So what I did is I used ChatGPT to help me figure out what to ask the mortgage brokers. And I used this prompt where I'm going to say property savvy mortgage broker to help with purchasing an investment property. I've attached my goals and my current financial situations. What questions should I ask them? You paste your goals and the numbers sheet you filled out, and it gave me these 5 really good questions that I can ask the mortgage broker on the calls. Things like what's based on my income and my deposits, how many properties could I acquire before hitting the borrowing capacity, and what strategies would you use to extend my capacity? So you're kind of testing them to understand their knowledge. You don't just want a mortgage broker that's going to approve you a loan. You want a mortgage broker that's going to build out the strategy to build out your portfolio, and that's what I'm looking for. Other questions like how do you stagger lenders? Should I buy under my own name or whether trusts or different other structures? And what rental yield and cash flow should I need to purchase the next property? Should I go with non-third tier lenders as well, non-majors? So these sort of questions help you clarify what you need to do and what's your strategy going to involve to build out your portfolio. And then, I wasn't an expert, but I used ChatGPT to help me fill this out. And the goal is just to find a broker that can provide you on a clear strategy to get you from where you are now to where you want to be. And they've helped others do the same. You don't just want someone that's never done it for anyone else before. You want someone that's clearly done it for others as well. So this is the strategy that I use to currently find my first investment savvy mortgage broker. I went through about 10 different ones. Having this clear goal, having clarity on my numbers, going through the process to find one that's specifically for investment properties, and having clear questions, knowing your numbers, knowing what to ask them allows you to kind of filter out which ones are going to help you. Now, there's a few red flags you should look for, and that things that I went through going through that first time finding these brokers. And the first one was response time. I had one guy that took 6 weeks to respond to our first contact, which was way too long. You don't want a broker that's, that either in demand or that's not going to help you in time. So 6 weeks was way too long. You ideally want them responding, in a weekly basis. Second red flag was no strategy. Someone that just told me my borrowing capacity and that was it. They didn't tell me how I was going to increase. If I increase my income to a certain amount, I'll be able to borrow this amount, or how I'm going to get past that 2 property threshold. They didn't have the strategy. They just knew what my borrowing capacity was and they weren't going to help with the strategy. So that's a red flag, knowing that they're not going to be able to help me to get towards my goals. And the third one is you just don't get along with the person. I had one that we just didn't connect on the call and realized that it wasn't going to work out. So that's fine. Move on to the next one. And so your action step for this video is follow this process that I've just outlined to find an investment savvy broker and then get your pre-approval as soon as possible. Over the next week or 2, I'm going to be getting my pre-approval and I'm going to keep documenting the process I'm going through to find my first investment property. But this is the process I went through to kind of find the investment savvy mortgage broker on my A team. So I hope you found this video valuable. If you want to follow along on my journey where I'm documenting, sharing the process that I'm going through to buy my first investment property, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out.